So tonight is all about knowing your audience and communicating with data viz. So whether it's your most recent board report, recounting last quarter's successes, or bringing the latest headlines to life in your favorite newspaper, great data visualization can bridge the gap between analytics and impact. This evening, our speakers will cover both the creativity and strategy of visual storytelling, examining how to harness data to its fullest potential while tailoring to the needs of your audience. First up, we'll hear from Jason Swan, who will discuss the business case for good data visualization that can empower business decision-making. And we'll then hear from Nicola Rennie as she guides us through what to think about when designing for a broad audience that may not have knowledge of the data or analysis. So, first up, I'll hand over to Jason Swan, data consultant at Talan Data and AI. He works a lot with the financial services industry and has a specialization in visual analytics and self-serve solutions. So, big hand for Jason.
Thank you very much. Let's see if this works. Yeah, perfect. Cool. So, as Max said, my name is Jason Swan. A little bit about me here, which I'll cover off in a sec, but just in terms of contents, we're going to be looking at essential design principles. So that is kind of what do you build, how do you go about it. In terms of, oh, sorry, is that better? Aye, there we go, sorry. I forget, I just think I'm that loud, everyone can hear me anyway, so I apologise. So essential design principles, and then I'll move on to talk about the dashboarding, so that's kind of the actual build of it. And then finally at the end, I'll cover off post-build considerations. So that is, after your dashboard build, what should you be looking at? What's the key things that you need to be aware of? And how do you go about planning for that as well? So first slide is just kind of a bit about me, why I feel entitled to talk about data visualization. So I studied mathematics, systems and finance at university. And then I also studied artificial intelligence and applications, which kind of makes sense that I now work in financial services. Both kind of go well together. I work currently as a visualization SME within a large retail bank. I own a number of dashboards across a wide range of tools. I've recently led a migration from one platform to another platform, which was empowering people across the bank within the retail banking space to move across from ThoughtSpot to QuickSight, which is two of the visualization tools that I've got some experience with. As well as that, I host an internal to the bank visualization community. And as part of that, we've recently held our own version of Iron Viz, which is the Tableau competition. So that's a really good way to get new users onboarded. And it empowers people as well. It's really important, I think, to get a wide range of users, whether you're brand new to a tool or whether you're someone who's been using it for 10 years, being able to work with diverse data sets and kind of show off a little bit. We all like to do that. Well, maybe it's just me, I don't know. It's a really good way to do it. So I think that's something that I've done well in. And then in terms of certifications, I've got a couple for Tableau, I've got a couple for ThoughtSpot, and if there was any for QuickSight, I'd probably have them as well. I'm holding my breath for that one, we shall see. Maybe next time I do it, I'll have got a couple of them. So first of all, I will cover all this as we go through, but I just wanted to highlight your kind of project timeline. So if you're planning out how to build data sets and dashboards, this is what you should go through. So, start off with a plan, the who, the what, and the how. We'll move then on to data, which always starts with your exploratory data analysis, your EDA. Build a comprehensive data model and why that's important, because it's not just a visualization, everything that sits behind it should be done well as well. Your POC is the next step. There's no point in me building out a dashboard, getting to the end of it and going, here you go, guys. And then they come back and say, that's not what we wanted. So if you involve people, bring them along on the journey with you, the business feeds into it all the whole way through, that builds a better dashboard in my view. We'll then cover off UAT, what the process is and why you should do it with your stakeholders. And then finally, like I said, we'll cover off the release. So after UAT, what should you be considering? How should you be working with people continuously to ensure that what you've built makes sense? So as I said, we've got the who, the what, and the how. So who's going to be using your dashboard? Who are the stakeholders who are going to be using it on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? And if by figuring that out at the start and working collaboratively with them, you can know who they are, and that defines your build. If I've got a senior stakeholder who only wants it for decision making, they don't want to see the nitty gritty. They want a KPI that they can look at and go, we're up, we're down. If I'm building for an analyst, they want to see a bit more in the detail. They want to see the drill down. They want to see that next level of detail. So if you work based on that, you work with them, you'll build a better dashboard. The what's the dashboard for? I know so many people that have built dashboards because, oh, it makes sense. Everyone loves a dashboard. I do love a dashboard, but I would never build one without a reason. If you want to deliver insight, if you want to create action from it, have that in your head the whole way through. That should be your kind of driving purpose as we move through that journey. And then final question would always be, can you build it? So that's the how. You know, there's no point in me saying, yeah, I'll build you a dashboard. Then it comes to the data and I go, I don't know what's there. I don't know what I can source. I don't know where I can get it from. And then the big one, which I'll cover in a sec, is what BI tool should I be using? That might be decided by your business. You might only have access to one. You might have access to 3, 4 different tools. Pick the one that serves your purpose best. Pick the one that serves what your stakeholders want best. And we'll cover that off as we go through this. So, as I kind of noted there, EDA is a big part of this. Your data discovery here, and I've covered off quite a lot of these questions here. These are a start. These are a base. You might have different questions that you want to answer, but to me, this is how I start. Is there a good data source there? What's available off the shelf? Where can I get it from? You know, you might need to raise different accesses. You might need to speak to different teams. If you do all this at the start, you start well. If you wait to the end to go, oh, I need this data source, but I've not got access to it, you're pushing back timelines. If you start off with these questions, it'll make your life so much better. Another thing that I've found useful, what other dashboards have I seen that have something similar? Whether that is, oh, I like that visualization, I like what they've done there, or they've got data points that might be relevant for me. Pick up with them, liaise with people around you, base your work off what you've seen other people do that's worked well. Also base it on what you've seen that doesn't work well. You can refine what they've done, improve it. Working with other people kind of gives you that there. And then the final ones there are kind of around what timeframes are we looking at and how often does your data refresh. There's no point in you saying, I'll give you something daily, but they only need it monthly or weekly. Whatever they need, work with them, figure out when it refreshes. And a lot of this comes down to you can automate it. It's not part of this, but what I do a lot of the time is I'll build a data set in a database. I'll then automate the process. It removes a lot of manual obligation. So if you do all this at the start, it helps you out. And the benefits of the great data model, the big one here, obviously at the top, is AI and self-service. It's becoming much more prominent. I've seen it in my last few years at the bank. It's became much more, people want to know more about it. Can I use AI? How can I use it? So for example, we've got a new tool called QuickSight that we've been using in the bank. It's got a functionality called Amazon Q. If I don't build my data well, the AI doesn't work. There's no point in me giving them access to the entire database if I can give them the relevant data points that will answer the questions that I anticipate they have. If you build well, you get self-serve and an AI capability. Additional benefits here. So these are ones that I've found myself. I'm building assets that people can then implement, use them for strategic solutions. One-off data requests tend to be reduced. If you can self-serve in 30 minutes, or you can request data from me and you might wait 2 weeks, everyone's going to take the easy option here. So if you've got stuff there, people are going to take advantage of it. And then the last kind of two there are around governance. We've all shared an Excel with someone. They've took data points from it, carried it through, and then it comes back to you and it's not what you intended or it's not how you interpreted it. If you build a dashboard for people, you can lead them on the story. You can lead them through something that makes sense from your point of view, and you're explaining it in a way that is visually appealing to them. That also ties into your data quality there as well. So pre-build, as I mentioned at the start there, what BI tools can you use? I've only included kind of 4 here. There is obviously the likes of Looker. There is R, as someone mentioned outside. They've used R for visualization. I know you can do stuff in Python and Jupyter Notebooks. Use whatever tool is most appropriate. And as long as you have one that works for you, great, you're going to do well. As long as the stakeholders have access to it, that's a big one. Consistency matters. We covered the timeline at the start there and kind of how you should plan through it. If you have a plan for how you want to approach things, if you stick to that and you follow those steps, it should make your life a little easier. One of the things that we found as well is that a template, you want to stick to it. If people are familiar with one framework, let's be consistent here. Let's have everything looking and feeling the same. You can interpret it however you want once you start your individual builds. However, consistency is what's really important. And then these kind of two tie in together. Does each visual add value? And is the most appropriate view chosen? I'm a big fan of a tree map. I love building them out. I think they look great. I've put them into proof of concepts, took the stakeholders, and they've went, can I get a bar chart? Can I get a table? And I'm like, you know what? I'll give you a table. I built one recently that looks at flow of funds between accounts, and I'm like, oh, I could build a sand key. And I had a conversation with the most senior person, and they went, can I just click which one goes to which? And I'm like, yeah, here you go. Work with them, right? This is my point about if you speak to people, if you engage with them, they'll tell you what they want. And as much as I love a tree map, I've stopped using them because no one interprets them the same way I do. No one's got the same love and appreciation. So yeah, pick the one that makes the most sense. And then this one here is key. This session is about visualization, but the visualization is your final step. If you bake a cake, the majority of the work you do is making the cake. It's not the icing at the end. It's not putting the nice flowers and stuff on it. It should be 80% data prep, 20% visualization at the end. This is the part that makes it look good. This is the part that the stakeholders see. The work that we do in the background is the majority of it. And if you can do that without having to build anything weird or anything odd, which I've done myself, then you're grand. And if you make the visuals look good, the stakeholders don't mind the 80%. They'll give you the time to do it. If your 20% is good enough that they see it and go, that makes sense. That's what I wanted. And now on to the important part. So dashboarding. I will not cover this because it has a lot of text. However, effectively, the way to think of it is when you build dashboards, whenever you're working with visualization tools, you've got two options. You've got a dimension, you've got a measure. So your dimensions are qualitative. So that would be names, dates, geographical data. And the way I think of them is that's how I split my data out. Your measures would be your data points, that would be your numbers, that's your values. And the two fit in well together. One doesn't work without the other. I can give you numbers, but without the context of the dimensions, they make no sense. There is obviously additional points there around null values and calculated fields and parameters. I've highlighted parameters because I will cover off how they can be used to give you a multitude of diverse views at the end of this. So I just want to call that out. So this was built in QuickSight, and this is an example of what you'd build for your decision makers. So if I've got an executive coming to me and saying, I want to know how many customers we have with this product month on month, I could build them multitudes of tables and views, but all they need to know is, here's the number for this month, what's the number for last month, what's the change? And by doing this in QuickSight, this took me 30 seconds. It's drag and drop. This is why this is great for what it is. This is a great tool. This is a great visualization. And I was able to build this very quickly, send it over to the stakeholder, and they're like, this is great. That's all I need to know. And that's kind of the value of KPIs. So the one there is really good for a KPI dashboard, which I've built quite a lot of. This one is from Tableau, and this one fits in really well when you start looking at building in views for multiple users. This visualization took me 8 calculated fields, which is a bit more than the previous one. However, the benefit of this is I'm building a single dashboard for multiple users. So my execs can come in and go, right, that's my top level number. Below that, or in the next tab, the next stakeholder is maybe a bit more in depth, can look at the next level of detail, the different level of granularity below this, which is where we come into building for users and analysts. So this is your bread and butter. Most of us will be using the dashboard, not just for a number, we'll be coming in and going, what's the additional information that sits below this? So this is a time series graph, and what this looks at is the base build. So I will show you here, I've got a select visualization option, and this is the parameter I was speaking about. So I can build this single view here, which shows you the trend across time. And by having an option that is split between it, you can view this as a bar chart or a time series. And I'll show you how we split it out in a sec. However, this one here, again, fairly simple visualization, but this is the kind of level of detail that most of my stakeholders are looking for. They want to know what the trend is across a bigger time period. They're not just interested in that single KPI. This is the exact same graph, however, it's just split out now. So I changed it over to a bar chart, and I've added in colors for all these different things. So by splitting this one out, I've split it into different age bands here. So I can now look at it and say, okay, I can see the trend across the time period. However, for the most recent month, you might want to see that additional level of detail. So this is how we start drilling down. So rather than you having 5 dashboards for 5 different people, I've got one dashboard and I've got 100 users. 10 of them might come in and just look at the KPIs in the first page. The next 10 might come into this level of detail and say, okay, I'm really interested in seeing what that looks like for a specific month with a specific range of data. As well as that, and this is where we start getting into the real drop downs and the real level of detail, I've built in 2 additional parameters onto this tab specifically. The first one is top N, so that's the one at the bottom here. I should have changed that to 3, I apologize, because it was 5 in the last one. So as you can see, I've got top 3 there, which is 10, 5 to 10, and the 2 to 5. Everything else is grouped into others. But if people are interested in, say, the top 10, if you type in 10 here, it will bring out the top 10, then others. By being able to build in parameters like this, it lets the stakeholders have control. And I think that's something that we've found really, really useful. The additional one here on the right, it gives you the option of what are you interested in? So I've had stakeholders come to me and say, I want to know how this population splits by age group. Fairly simple one. And then I've said, okay, that's one metric. I know that next month they're going to ask me for what's the brand, what's the segment, what's these customers doing, what's the first product. By me building in these additional data points into my data, it then allows me to give that additional context, that additional information. And like I said, you're empowering people to go in and see what they're interested in. Post-build considerations. So I know many people who built a dashboard as a one-off, and then that's it. They just leave it, and the dashboard doesn't get used. So what I would always recommend is release it for testing. Work with your user base. Is it performing as expected? Is there anything missing? Is there anything that's not working the way they expect it to? We've all put filters in and forgot to apply them. Maybe that's just me. We've all built stuff and then we'll go, who's using it? How often is it being used? You can look for trends. So if you're able to monitor all that, you can do that during your release period, and then that's where you get feedback. If you build a dashboard for 100 people, 10 people use it in the first month, there's a conversation that has to be had. What's missing? What would get you using this? So I think that's one that's really important. The second point here is around iterative improvements. Most dashboards I build, I think the latest one I've got is on version 9. Yeah, version 9. We released it for the first time about 18 months ago. Every couple of months, people say, oh, could you add this in? Can you enhance this? Can I get an alternative view? If you work with people, you release it to them and then get feedback on it. It should be evolving. Some dashboards are great static. However, the number that I have that I can keep improving and refining, and then they keep getting used, I think that's a really important point. And again, you're empowering people, you're engaging with your stakeholders. Big one that people often forget about, who's going to own the dashboard? You can release a dashboard and then leave it. No one updates it, no one maintains it. But if someone has ownership of it, which is the data set, who's going to be refreshing it? When are they going to be refreshing it? Which ties back to the point from earlier on. Are you going to schedule your refreshes? How often? When does it update? You should be working through all this with your stakeholders and an understanding of it. And then the final point, just to tie back to the data model that I mentioned earlier, if you build your data well, you should be able to answer additional questions that might come from your dashboard. And that also ties back into the iterative improvements. If you build it well from the start, there might be points that you can add in the future that would enhance it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jason. So we'll go to a quick Q&A now. Does anyone have a question? Yes.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Jason, for the presentation. You spoke a little bit about the choice of tools.
Yes.
Do you have any thoughts around tool integration or combination of tools? In reality, sometimes we have a variety of tools that we work with. So do you see a landscape where we can use like a variety of tools instead of choose one or another?
So as it stands, I use two quite regularly. So I use Tableau. I have Tableau that I use for my overarching projects. These are ones that I improve regularly. I've got the one I just mentioned is on version 9. The reason that's so good is because the visual aspects of it are fantastic. I then use QuickSight. I use that for simpler analysis, quicker analysis. The turnaround time on it is super important for me. So I used to send Excels to people. I've now said I'll just give you a dashboard. To me, it's about choosing the right tool for the right job. If I had to build a KPI dashboard for you, I'd do it in QuickSight because it's so much simpler and you've got instant access. If you choose the right tool for the job, that should make life easier. And I hope at some point we can integrate them all together. But as it stands, the right tool for the right job that answers the right question is how I'd approach it.
Yep.
Thank you. Yeah. When you've got a stakeholder coming to you, they'll come to you with some assumptions on what you're doing for them, which may not be the reality. How do you either anticipate that or respond to, or which ones are you finding the ones that are most challenging, and how do you either anticipate or respond to those to make sure you're working well together and getting a dashboard that they need rather than something they've assumed is what they need?
I think the way I approach it tends to be through the proof of concept. So what I would tend to do is, if I'm building a dashboard which has 5 tabs in it, I'd maybe build out the first tab and then speak to a couple of stakeholders and say, what's your feedback on this? Does this give you the answer that you were expecting? If you go through that process and each time you add in something new, you engage more and more people. So by the time you get to the end of it, you're doing the UAT release, 90% of your stakeholders have seen it already. So if you can get feedback from each one that says, this works for me, if there's one who has a negative view of, well, I don't want that visualization, but you've got the justification of, well, everyone else is going to use that one, you can build in that alternative view. I had someone recently who joined the bank who said, could you just build one view for me? And I'm like, well, it would take me a few weeks. It's not part of the timeline. She's like, but I really want it. And I'm like, well, you can use this one to get. Oh, can I? If you have that conversation, if you can explain to them why you've done it that way and how other people are using it, it should hopefully give them that comfort and that kind of consistency across it.
Thank you. What challenges have you had in terms of quality and clean data?
The data is always the biggest challenge. I'm quite lucky in that a lot of the time what I use are data marts. So we've got engineers who build them for us. However, at times I've worked with data that hasn't been refreshed on time. I've worked with data that has missing columns randomly some months. I think it's about understanding what's available, understanding limitations, and being comfortable to say to people, what's the missing here? How can we resolve that? And as you work through the process and you build out the dashboard, you might, if you don't have the data point you want, maybe you miss out this iteration. Maybe you source it for the next one. And if you do have the challenge, as long as you're willing to have the conversation and you can explain any decision making you make around why you're including it or why you're not, I think that's kind of the best we can do as analysts.
Any more questions?
Good.
No.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jason. Give it up for Jason. Thank you. So next up, we have Nicola Rennie. She's a data visualization specialist at the ONS, the Office for National Statistics. And she has a strong interest in explaining complex quantitative ideas to a broad audience. She's also written a guide on best data visualization practices. So give it up for Nicola.
Hello. Okay, so what I'm going to be chatting about is how do you design charts or visualizations that work for everybody. So as a brief introduction to myself, I'm a data visualization specialist at the Office for National Statistics. I think I'm very lucky in that job because I get to spend basically my entire time just making charts. So it's a really fun job. My background is in statistics, and I've worked previously in data science consultancy, and I'm somewhat of a recovering academic. I've also worked quite closely with the RSS, the Royal Statistical Society, and developing their best practices for data visualization guidance. So what I want to start with is a question about who is your audience, right? That's the first thing you really want to be thinking about. So it might be people like policymakers or senior leaders, right, who might not know very much about analytics or statistics or modeling, but they will know the context of your data really, really well. They will probably know the context of that data much better than you do. So you can make some assumptions about the knowledge that they have. You might also be making charts or dashboards for data analysts, okay, other statisticians, and you can make some assumptions about the knowledge they have around data analytics, modeling, the types of things you're doing with it. But they might not necessarily understand the data itself and where it comes from very well. So the first step is always trying to figure out who are the people that you're designing visualizations for, right? And it's almost never as easy as saying it's that one group of people there, right? There's usually a few different groups of people. And so you have to think about how much can you assume about that audience that you've identified. So if you're only making charts for other data analysts, you can make quite a lot of assumptions about how much data analytics and statistics they might know. Okay? If you are making a chart for like lots of different groups of users, or if you're making a chart for essentially the general public, you can make far fewer assumptions. Okay? So what happens if you can't assume anything? Okay? What sort of knowledge does the general user have? Okay? So to give you a little bit of a taste of what you want to be thinking about when you're designing for that broad audience, okay? So the average reading age of adults in Scotland is between 9 and 11 years old. Right? So if you write a paragraph in a report and it's aimed at a reading age of about 10 years old, 50% of the population will be able to understand that well. Okay? And most people in the room are probably a little bit more interested in data rather than words. But the picture's very, very similar for numeracy. Okay? So 45% of adults in the UK have below primary school level numeric skills. Okay? So I think if you are someone who works with data for a long time, you tend to think it's a lot simpler than it is, and you might not be aware of how much your audience understands. And when we talk about making data and information accessible to everybody, it's not just about the words and the way you present it. It's also thinking about the types of charts and things like colors, for example, that you use to present that data. Right? So there's about 3 million people in the UK who have some form of color vision deficiency. Right? And if you're using different tools, a lot of the different tools have some nice color palettes, and you can make things that look really bright and lovely. But most of them, by default, are not accessible. Okay? So everybody can't see the same thing that you're showing them. Okay. There's also about 10% of adults in the UK have mobility or motor impairment. So if you're building something like a dashboard or interactive chart, and it's something like a click and then drag to select an area or move something around, there's going to be quite a lot of people who can't drag things. So you need to have different options for how you interact with any sort of dashboard. And I want to highlight a couple of things that have come out of the code of practice for statistics. Okay? So I work at ONS, so we have to follow the code of practice for statistics. But if you're someone who works with data and you don't have to follow it, I still really suggest you go and read it because it's really, really useful advice. Okay? So two of the things that really stand out for me is that we have to ensure that data and statistics are easy to use and understandable. Okay? So keeping in mind those sort of numeracy and literacy rates across the population. And we also have to ensure easy access for all when publishing data, statistics, and supporting material. So making sure that everybody is able to access the information. So once you've figured out who your audience is, the next thing you need to think about is what is it that you're really trying to communicate? Okay, what specific thing are you trying to say? Are you really trying to show them all of the detailed, accurate numbers? Is that really the level of detail you need to go into? Or is it more about the big picture message? Okay? Sometimes the details and the sort of exact values are less important. So I want to show you a couple of different charts. This is the first example. So this is sometimes called a sort of hockey stick chart, but it's looking at changes in temperature over time from 1850 onwards. Okay? It's kind of like a classic chart in the sense that it's got years along the x-axis, you've got your differences in temperature on the y-axis, you've got different colored lines. Right? It's a kind of classic chart that you'd see in like any scientific report. Okay? And there's a few things I could criticize about it, but overall it's reasonably well designed. Right? It gives you quite a lot of information. I'm going to show you another chart of essentially the same data. Okay? It's the same information. Okay? You can't tell the exact values from this chart, okay? But the overall message, the overall trend, and what you're trying to get across is much, much clearer. Okay? So again, it's thinking about what is your message. Do you want to show people the details, the difference between different methods, or do you want to say, hey, it's getting a lot warmer? Okay? Like one of those charts is slapped on the side of buses and printed on hoodies. The other one, not so much, and I'll let you guess which one's on the side of a bus. Okay. The other thing I want to kind of point out at this time is that when you're thinking about what's your message and sort of what's an effective way of showing that, effective charts and memorable charts are unfortunately not the same thing. Sometimes they are, and that's like the ideal chart that we're all trying to make. But you can get really effective charts like line charts and bar charts, but they're probably not that memorable. Okay, if you're like sitting in a dashboard that you look at every day, or if it's on page 7 of a 30-page report, you're probably not thinking, oh, remember that bar chart? That was excellent. Okay. You can also have memorable charts that are terrible, and they're memorable for all the wrong reasons. We try not to make those, but sometimes we do. Okay. So it's thinking about, do you want to show the information as accurately as possible, and the most effective way of doing that, or are you trying to make something that's really, really memorable and gets that big message across? We now want to think about, okay, we know who our audience is, okay, and we know what we want to say to them. What's the best way to communicate that message to your audience? Okay. And this is a quote that gets thrown around a lot. Okay? So picture is worth 1,000 words. The other quotes you get is like, the data tells its own story, let the data speak for itself. And just because you are making visualizations, that doesn't mean you can't also use words. Okay? They're a really important part of the visualizations we build. Okay? So one of the things that is really useful when you're building visualizations is to use what we call narrative titles. Okay? So summarize the information in the chart in the title. Okay? So describe the main trend. Okay? Some people don't like that because they feel it's sort of redundant. If you're showing a line going upwards, writing a sentence that's saying a line is going upwards feels like, well, that information's already there. Okay? But reinforcing a message is really, really effective. Okay? A lot of people will not spend time, unfortunately, looking at those lovely charts you've made. They're just going to read a line and then skip forward onto the next thing. Okay? So people are more likely to remember it if the main message is also in the chart title. Okay? And if the sort of main message you want to put in that chart title isn't the main message you get from the chart, you should probably go and think again about what your chart is actually showing and what design you've used. Okay? So as an example, this is a chart showing the change in sort of households in temporary accommodation over time. Right? That title is factually accurate. Okay? That is what that chart shows. Okay? But if you change the title and show, okay, the main message is that the number of households in temporary accommodation is at a record high, it summarizes exactly what's in that chart in one sentence. Okay? It's an easy sentence that they can then go and repeat to someone else if they need to. The other ways that we can use text in charts is to improve accessibility. Okay? So this is a line chart showing 4 different things over time, and we've used 4 different colors, 1 for each category. Okay? And you've got the legend at the top showing how does the color map to the category. Okay? This is what that chart looks like in black and white. Okay? If you could only see the one on the right, which category is which line? Absolutely no idea. Okay? So if a chart works in black and white, it's much more likely to be accessible. Okay? People who are colorblind are much more likely to be able to tell the difference between different lines if you can tell the difference when it's printed in black and white. So one of the ways you can get around this is, for example, to use like shapes on lines as well as just color. The other way you can do it is adding labels. Okay? Don't use a legend if you don't have to, just stick a label next to the thing that says that's what this is. Okay? So that's much more accessible. Even if that was in black and white, you'd still be able to tell which line goes where. Okay? And I think this is one of the examples I love when you think about talking about how do you choose a chart type. So you get all those flow charts that says if it's data over time, it should be a line chart. And you've made this nice one that's nice and accessible. Okay, I'm going to show you another chart that also has 4 categories, the same 4 categories over time. Okay? Over the same time period, same categories, same colors, everything. Okay? Looks like that. Okay? That's an absolute mess. Even if you have full color vision, that's really difficult to read. Okay? So choosing a chart type isn't just about what type of data do you have. Is it something that's over time? Is it counts? It's actually what are the values in that data, and does it make sense to show the data that you have in that way? Okay? And a lot of the examples I've talked about are sort of bar charts and line charts, are things that a lot of people are going to be familiar with. It doesn't mean that you can't ever use something that's more complicated. Okay? So something like a tree map or a Sankey or like a waterfall chart, a lot of people might never have seen one of those before and might not understand how to read those charts. If you're using those types of charts for a broad audience, it's not that you can't use them, it's just that they might need a little bit of explanation, some sort of walkthrough build up to that complicated chart over time. So we do quite a lot of these kind of scrolly telling things where we walk you through step by step until we get to that sort of final main message. You can also use annotations, okay, to add context. Okay? So if you are, showing how far away from a target you are, okay, is there some threshold that you're aiming for? Put that threshold in. Okay? If there's an important date, okay, so some sort of deadline, or if you're making any chart with data from the last 5 years, pointing out when like COVID lockdowns happened in your charts, okay, highlight those important dates. Okay? You can also use annotations to highlight what a user should look at. So if you've got lots of data points, a big arrow that's pointing at this one, look at that one, is really, really helpful. We do want to make sure that annotations are quite short, okay, and close to the part of the chart they relate to. Okay? We don't want to be adding paragraphs of text on top of our charts. Okay? So this is an example of a chart looking at the number of women MPs who have been elected at general elections. Okay? Quite a lot wrong with it. Okay? It's not the perfect chart because it does a lot of things that are unusual. So the first thing that's a little bit unusual is that each sort of row of the chart is a different date, but the dates aren't equally spaced. And you also go like top to bottom, which is quite an unusual way of displaying data over time. So what we could do is actually plot it over time and put the dates sort of in the right place. Okay? And what you see when you look at it this way is you see, okay, there's this big jump right around the year 2000. But if we put that into a little bit of context, so let's add an annotation. Let's say actually the threshold we're aiming for is 30%. Okay? Suddenly that big jump around 2000 doesn't actually look as impressive. You can see that it's only in the last 2 data points you've actually crossed that threshold. And actually, you can go further. Okay? If you add in not just what's the sort of minimum threshold, but what's a more sort of representative target, still miles away from it. Okay? So it's not just about showing the data and let the data tell its own story. It's about giving the context for where does that data sit. Okay? So if you want to design better data visualizations, know who your audience are, know what you're actually trying to say to them, and think about how do you design your charts to communicate that message to your audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nicola. So yeah, we'll move on to the second Q&A. Anyone have any questions? Yep.
Thanks. I was looking at the last chart you showed with the elections, and you have all these thresholds on the vertical axis. But is it worth kind of explaining the jump in 2000 and say, I don't know, Tony Blair decided to have this quota of women as candidates or something? Because what you've shown is not necessarily the cause of the jump. It's what we're failing to meet, but sometimes.
It's a good point. Again, it's thinking about like what is the message you're trying to say? Are you trying to show, this change happened because of something, or you're trying to show how far away from a target you actually are? Because depending on which one of those things is the most important, that will change the way you visualize the data. So highlighting a specific time point where there's a big jump and saying, okay, this also happened at the same time, that's really important if that's what you're trying to highlight. So yeah, think about the purpose of what your chart is trying to show.
Hi there. I was curious, a bit of a self-interested question, but how have you seen different AI automated and support technologies changing the way you're doing this work? I happen to have a startup that automates some of this, but yeah, just curious in your experience.
So in terms of the way that I tend to use AI for building visualizations, most of the stuff I build is in JavaScript, so it's more like helping the implementation of it. What I've kind of found is that with AI tools, asking them to build charts for you, you have to give them a lot of really specific prompts in order to get something that is useful. And at that point, in order to get those really specific points, you have to have a good knowledge of data visualization anyway. So I did an experiment a little while ago where you just sort of say, here's some data, make me a chart of this over time. It was bad. It tends to make things that are not accessible, or those sort of defaults. Choose a chart type based on the type of data, not the data itself. So it helps with fine-tuning and it helps with implementation. But in terms of design, if you already have good knowledge of data visualization, you probably don't need it. And if you don't have good knowledge of data visualization, it's probably going to make something bad, has been my experience.
Thank you. So this is a little bit in the weeds, but maybe it's a good example of a wider problem. Have you got any recommendations or rule of thumb for when you're trying to show how big a jump there is between something, but you're dealing with data points where maybe there's a whole cluster of them way, way, way down the axis, and then there's just one outlier that you're trying to show, or maybe it's a trend, like there's the only way that you're going to get those things on the screen page at the same time is either by scaling it such that the difference that you're trying to illustrate becomes less obvious. So either, you know, squidging it up or using a logarithmic scale, and at that point, not a lot of people know how, you know, intuitively they are less intuitive than standard, or you do something like I've seen in Nature journal where you've got a broken axis and it just jumps, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, is there a kind of general gist of like how you get around that?
What I tend to do in that situation is have like a zoomed in version of the chart. So you have the full chart, the like full stretched out axis, and then you're like, oh, we should look at this bit in more detail. So you have this sort of little pop out, like zoomed in version. So you get the detail, but it's like mapped to the context of where does it sit in amongst everything else is what I tend to do. Best of both worlds, basically.
When you're dealing with like large data sets, how would you make a decision on whether to do the calculations in your backend site, like a database, or when to pull it into the chart itself and calculate it within the chart?
Easily noticeably slower trying to do it on the front end. Then you sort of pre-calculate stuff and store it in its own little file and read in the pre-calculated things. If it's not noticeably slower, then it makes it easier to update if you can just pull in the raw data. So we tend to do like user testing and we check how responsive things are. And basically, when we do user testing, we watch people like using the website or using the app, and you can sort of tell if they get noticeably annoyed when things are slow, and that's kind of it's a good sign.
Is there like a rough like page load time that you aim for to be like less than or something?
The visible part of the page should be instant. Is you know, in today's world, like a 2-second wait, like when you say it out loud, it sounds like nothing. Can't you wait 2 seconds for a website to load? But people do get annoyed by that. So we do like lazy loading. So we have like pages on charts, like they might have like 25 charts. If you scroll all the way down, you don't want to render 25 charts at once. Render 1 or 2 charts, and as someone scrolls down the page, then the other ones start to render as well. So you only pull in the bit of the data someone's actually looking at that moment in time.
Hi, Nicola. Thank you. That was brilliant, especially about accessibility. I think I'll steal a couple of those tips. But in terms of when you're thinking about your visualizations and you are thinking about your audience, as you said, was very important, but you can't know each of the individual audience in terms of their accessibility. Is there any fail-safe tips that you have when you're creating them to ensure that you're capturing as many people as you can so that they can understand them?
So there are some automated like testing platforms that will you give your report on a website or a dashboard as to how accessible it is. Like they're a useful starting point. They tend not to, they're not going to catch everything. The main thing I think for accessibility is giving people choice, right? There is no perfect solution that will be the best solution for every single person. So where possible, give people a choice that lets them choose the best version of the site for themselves. There is no real replacement for going out and talking to people. So, if you have a disability network, make sure those people are involved in whatever user research you're doing, and get everyone's perspective as much as possible. You can have some automated solutions. You can try to pick the best thing, but go and test them with actual human beings and let them tell you rather than making decisions for them.
Just to build on that, I can't remember, but there is a website that lists all the different types of color blindness. And if you ask people what color blindness they have, they will tell you, and then you can build on top of that using appropriate colors, etc.
Yeah. So you can, if you're making a chart, and you might have multiple color palette options, so you can drop down in the same way that you can get like reading mode to change the background color. It's not just helpful for people who are colorblind, it's helpful for people who need like low or high contrast. I know I can't stare at a bright white screen for a really long time. So having like, again, different options is the most accessible you can make it.
That's it. So can we have another round of applause for Nicola, please? Okay, so we've just got a bit of a wrap up for the event, and we're going to let you know about some exciting things. But first, as part of the community, what we like to do is give a little open mic community shout out opportunity now. So if any of you have any events coming up that you want to share, or any projects or anything that you're working on, then now's your chance. We have someone over here.
So, hi, my name's Neville. In a couple of days, this will be on the Data Lab calendar events. But in 2 weeks today, in this very room, the Royal Statistical Society Edinburgh Local Group will be doing our last event of the year. We've got several speakers, lots of refreshments, and we too have a speaker from the Office for National Statistics. It will not be Nicola. It's someone called Ian Drylaw, I think I've got the name correct, and he's coming to do a talk called Treat with Caution, Statistics of Edinburgh. So if you want to come find a little bit more about your home city, from a statistical perspective, you're welcome back here in 2 weeks' time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, great. Anyone else? Any projects or anything you're working on? Oh, yep, at the back. Oh, sorry, can you come to the front, apparently? It's good for me, I don't have to move.
Hi there, Daniel Shore. I'm the founder of GoLLM, and I wanted to give a shout out that, yeah, as I put in my question, basically we streamline feedback to insights. So we take like customer satisfaction data and we, in a proprietary way, give narratives and visuals and tables in a kind of cookie cutter approach to make this much faster for insights teams and research consultancies. And we're actually looking for a back-end developer. I don't know if any of you are in the room, but we're hiring now, so wanted to throw that out there. And also happy to chat with anyone who's interested in what we're doing.
Great. Anyone else? No, brilliant. Okay, so as they're already up, so we've got a lot of community events coming up in November. We've got TDL's AI support for business on the 12th of November, 19th of November, storytelling with data, so another data viz. It's the theme of the month, as I said earlier. 25th of November, data viz dashboards. 28th of November, accessibility in data visualization. And they're all online, so you don't even have to leave your house to get involved in those. And then on the 3rd of December, we've got an online webinar talking about placements. I will be hosting that as well. And you'll hear from placement hosts and previous students who are involved in placements. So if you're interested in that, please do come along to that or come chat to me now. And they're all accessed via the online community. So just go onto the community website and they're all listed on there and you can sign up through there. And as I mentioned earlier, we have the data visualization competition. It's back for 2025 or 26, depending on how you categorize it. The submission date is in January, but we were arguing about that earlier. Top prize is worth over £500. To begin with a chance of winning, you need to come up with a data visualization that communicates the co-benefits of climate action, and that's using data provided by Edinburgh Climate Change Institute. And you've heard lots of great tips tonight, so I think it's a good opportunity to use those, get involved. I think you can enter both individually and as a team, is that right? Yeah, so if you have a team or some other people get together and get involved. The data's available to download now. And yeah, there's more info on the website. I think there's a QR code. Yes, QR code there, so scan that. And finally, DataFest 2026, that is back. Tickets are on sale now, or will be tomorrow. It's the 27th and 28th of May next year at the Assembly Rooms again. It was really good fun last year, loads of really interesting talks. It was, a great event, so please do get your tickets for that. And yes, if you could give us some feedback on the event tonight, that would be great, through this QR code just up here. We'd love to hear how you found it. Otherwise, that's it. I think you're welcome to stay till 7:30, mingle, chat, share your ideas on what you've heard. But thanks very much to our speakers again. And thank you to you for coming. Have a good evening.